Unless you've been living under a rock for the last few days, you'll know that God of War has the game industry utterly captivated, with Kratos and Atreus sitting comfortably at 95 on Metacritic, with 85 reviews from critics. It's fair to assume that this game will be a commercial success as well as a critical one. Since its announcement back at E3 of 2016, God of War has been turning heads, because we all know and recognise Kratos, but he isn't the same as he once was. This doesn't look like the God of War we once knew. In the 22 or so months since its announcement, there's been a lot of discussion about this change, why old fans of the series shouldn't be worried, and why potential new fans should keep their eyes peeled. The answer to why the change is good will always be a subjective one, but for many it's an easy one. Not only because we should be excited for an aggressive but deep combat system and a breathtaking new world to explore, but also to finally see a more vulnerable and expressive Kratos, something that many feel the series has lacked throughout its lifetime. To me, that's the easy part to understand. And that's all I see people talking about, but I wanted to know why it changed at all. After looking into it, I found that the answer was far more intriguing than the simple, well, after 6 God of War games, people were just tired of the same old formula. If that were the case, then why after more than 100 games in, do people still play Mario? And if you think that Mario is just one exception to the rule, think again. Even a smaller series like Ratchet & Clank that has 13 if you include A Quest for Booty, the 2 PSP titles, All for One, Full Frontal Assault, and Into the Nexus. But when the reboot came out in 2016, both fans old and new loved it, mostly because it was a return to form that many believe, myself included, the series hadn't seen since a crack in time. Why didn't Sony Santa Monica apply the if it ain't broke, don't fix it attitude to God of War? Well, that's what I think I found out. So, if you do me the honour of getting comfy for the next 10 or so minutes, I'll do my best to explain why. Let's jump in.
I am hungry.
To start off, we need to understand the history of God of War. Get back to its roots. To date, God of War has had 6 games, 7 if you include the new one, 2 developers, and has spanned 3, soon to be 4 platforms. The very first God of War was released on March 22nd, 2005, and the latest entry is set to release April 20th this year. This coming Friday, in fact. That's 13 years that we've been playing God of War. Add an extra 3 for the developers, that's 16 years, over a decade and a half. That is a long time to be making the same game the same way, with only slight tweaks every time. The series was originally created and directed by David Jaffe, who up until God of War was primarily known for his work on the Twisted Metal series, which is obviously a very different kind of game. Jaffe said in an interview with Eurogamer back in July 2005 that God of War was actually inspired by Capcom's Onimusha series, saying, quote, "Let's do that with Greek mythology." And given that just a year prior Jaffe had said to IGN at E3 he just wanted to, quote, "make the players feel brutal, letting their inner beast free, and just going nuts," end quote. And coupling that with Jaffe's famous outspoken attitude in the games industry, it's crazy to think that God of War has been allowed to exist the way it has for as long as it has. It's important to realise that political correctness is something that really started to get going around the turn of the century. It's not something that's only been happening for the last 5 years, it's just the rise of social media that's made it feel that way. And if you've ever played God of War, you'll know that it often involves more, adult themes. Jaffe was given almost complete creative freedom, and a substantial budget. The fact that God of War even exists is a miracle, one that I am very thankful for. But God of War didn't just exist either, it was met with critical and commercial acclaim upon its release. When it came time to make the inevitable sequel, Cory Barlog, lead animator of the first game, became the game's director. He's also directing the newest game in the series, and David Jaffe became the creative director. The sequel was met with just as much fame and acclaim as the first was. Barlog even won a BAFTA for his work on the game. Despite the success of the franchise, after the release of God of War 2, David Jaffe left to found his own company, Eat Sleep Play, with Scott Campbell, founder of Incognito Entertainment, and created games exclusively for Sony. And around 8 months into development of God of War 3, Barlog left and Stig Asmussen took over. Why did both these guys leave? David Jaffe seems the most puzzling, as he created the series from the ground up. I expect he put a lot on the line to make this series work. He was given near full control and money to do it, but he still left. I don't want to put words in Jaffe's mouth because I couldn't find an exact statement as to why he left the franchise, but my guess would be that he's just a man. Jaffe poured his heart and soul into something, and he was fortunate for it to work out. Twice, in fact. How many times have you felt the creative juices flowing, been really excited for something, and then gotten bored before you even started the project? Now imagine that, but for years at a time. Maybe God of War just didn't scratch the creative itch anymore, so Jaffe left to pursue other passions. It doesn't sound that crazy when you think about it. Who knows, maybe I'm way off the mark, but that's just the way it seems to me. However, the reasons that Cory Barlog left are what I find to be truly important. but more on that later. So Stig and the talented team finishes up the rest of God of War 3, and just like the other two, it's a smash hit. Everyone loves God of War. A couple years earlier, Chains of Olympus is released on PSP by Ready at Dawn, and later in the same year that 3 is released, Ghost of Sparta comes out, also for the PSP by Ready at Dawn. People just can't get enough of God of War. Then came God of War Ascension.
Welcome to my weekly messages. I'm Jalela Starr. Today the topic is feeling the pressure to change.
Ascension released back in 2013, at a time when many thought the franchise was done, at least for a little while, especially after the ending of God of War 3. It garnered an 80 on Metacritic, which isn't bad at all, but most critics thought it didn't progress the franchise, or was even a step back. Whilst critic consensus is important to a game's longevity and success, it's nothing compared to fan consensus. This is where the money comes from. Critics could have given Ascension a 5 out of 10, but if the fans loved it and spent their money on it, it wouldn't have mattered all that much. That wasn't the case though. Many fans were disappointed. It came after the spectacle that was God of War 3 and tried to shake things up with a combat system that didn't need any shaking up. People thought the story was too short and didn't offer any development at all for Kratos. Kratos has become famous for being a one-note character, but at least at the end of all the other games, there's usually a revelation to develop Kratos when his standard stimuli of blood, sex and revenge won't. But Ascension was a prequel, so we already knew what was coming. After its first month, Ascension sold 570,000 copies. When compared to God of War 3's 1.1 million within the same time frame, things start to turn sour for the series. As a business, Sony and Santa Monica respond to this. Maybe it's time to take a break, go back to the drawing board. So this is why God of War changed, right? People didn't want God of War anymore, so they had to change it up? Well, yes and no. That's what the money says, but fans seem to hint at wanting more of the same old Kratos, just wanting him to progress a little and for the combat to stay pretty much the same, rather than a slight reinvention like Ascension tried to do. So then why did it change? If you look at the other popular games that PlayStation had at the time, you obviously see influences start to creep in. When Uncharted 2 Among Thieves came out in 2009, it took the games industry by storm. Naughty Dog showed everyone that games could do what films do, but games could do it better. With incredible blockbuster set pieces, fun and lovable characters, and solid gameplay, no matter what you think of the Uncharted series, it would be hard to deny that it's a real contender for the most influential game series of the last decade, maybe more. You can even see the impact that it had on God of War, a franchise that could be considered a far cry from Uncharted, just by looking at the way that Kratos climbs in Ascension. Then in 2013, Naughty Dog released The Last of Us, and revealed that not only are they approaching a godlike status in the industry, but that a game can make you feel big time. So that's it, God of War just made walking simulator like Naughty Dog to pander to the casuals. No, you plebeians. When you combine the influences of arguably the most influential games in the video game industry of the last decade, the reasons that Cory Barlog left God of War and what he did before he came back is because... oh, I didn't tell you that yet, did I? Well, let's get into it.
Show yourself! It cannot be. Forgive me. I mistook you for Saruman.
In an interview with Level Up in 2008, which I can only find excerpts of on Engadget.com, Barlog said that he originally left Santa Monica in part due to fear of being, quote, the God of War guy. He saw how successful it was and didn't want to make, quote, God of War 4, 5, and God of War the expansion pack, God of War the role-playing kart racing game, end quote. And though the article doesn't have a direct quote from Barlog himself, it does say that he appeared to be frustrated with the current state of the games industry. That game directors aren't afforded the same freedom and respect that equals of other media are. And he was right. Can you imagine Spielberg or Nolan walking onto a set and being told what to do after Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Dark Knight? No one would dare question them. You might think it's not the same, but God of War 2 sold over 4 million copies by 2012, and it was released when the PS3 was already out and battling with consumer wallets due to its hefty price tag. You can bet that Sony appreciated that money at the time, but the respect still wasn't there, and Barlog didn't think it would be there anytime soon. After Santa Monica, Barlog went on to work with George Miller, the director of the Mad Max saga, on a movie tie-in game, which eventually turned out to be the Mad Max game that released in 2015 that wasn't a movie tie-in game, although it is unclear just how involved Barlog was with the final outcome of this game. He also spent some time at Crystal Dynamics as the cinematic director for the Tomb Raider reboot. God of War has always been cinematic, in fact it's one of the biggest selling points, but the new game feels different, more personal, more intimate. After seeing the way that Tomb Raider turned out and working with a prolific director such as George Miller, it seems somewhat obvious now as to where much of the influence has come from. But why did he come back to God of War? To be the game's director, no less. When the head of Santa Monica Studios, Shannon Studstill, called him up, he could have just said no. He had already left the series once before for fear of being known as the God of War guy, and thought that the industry wasn't ready to give directors the creative freedom that they had earned. So what changed? Many of you may know that God of War is one single shot. No camera cuts. 0. Do you understand the immense difficulty that creates when directing a 25+ hour video game? Did you also know that Barlog proposed the same idea for the Tomb Raider reboot, but it was rejected? Probably for good reason too, because that sounds like an insane undertaking. But he persisted and did it anyway. He saw something in this outlandish idea and made it work. That is the work of a visionary, a true pioneer of the medium. This seems to be a trend amongst Sony's first-party lineup. The freedom these developers are being afforded now is something that I imagine many companies today would still scoff at. The Last of Us, an original IP released for the PlayStation 3 the same year that the PS4 launched. Horizon Zero Dawn, from a studio that had only made linear first-person shooters for over a decade, Guerrilla Games were allowed to make a sprawling and colourful open world with robot dinosaurs. Ghost of Tsushima, from a raccoon and his band of thieves to a superhero game to the Mongol invasion of feudal Japan. Sucker Punch have quite the repertoire. And Death Stranding. Whatever that is. Sony definitely deserves some credit here, but all they're doing is simply allowing visionaries to create without resistance. And because of this, we're now seeing game directors be elevated to a film director-like status. And it's about damn time. Anytime Neil Druckmann or Bruce Straley work on a game, I'm there. Herman Hulst is just a consultant on a game. I'm there. Hideo Kojima. I mean, he's been an icon for a long time, but if he ever makes a Barbie horseback riding game, I will be there. I think the same thing is happening to Cory Barlog right now. I haven't played God of War yet, but I bet I'll adore it, and want to play anything that Barlog's attached to in the future. I also think a similar thing is going to happen to Brian Interhol when Marvel Spider-Man releases later this year, and that other companies are going to start following Sony's lead. You could argue that Nintendo has always encouraged freedom, and I'd say you're right. But Nintendo very rarely lets its developers stray from its IP. Just look at this list of Nintendo's franchises from Wikipedia. And now look at Sony's. I understand that it's Wikipedia, but come on. After giving creators the freedom and respect they deserve, stories have become far more personal. They take more risks and are often all the better for it, in both story and gameplay. Everyone always says that the video game medium is still in its infancy, still just a child with so much more to come. Well, maybe it just hit puberty. Maybe it's time to rebel. Maybe it's starting to figure out it doesn't have to be like the popular kid in class, that it can do what they do and do it way better. Maybe it's starting to become an individual. So why has God of War changed? Because the industry changed. So that about does it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. It took me a little while and a lot of effort to make this video, but I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. On Friday I'll be putting out a video relating to Marvel Spider-Man and what I think of that game, as opposed to a God of War review, because obviously I don't get the review copies, but I'll try and get one out for Tuesday. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you didn't enjoy it, that's cool too, leave a dislike. Or you can leave me a comment and tell me how I can improve. Alternatively, you could leave a comment to tell me what you think of the new God of War game. Are you excited for it? Let's start a conversation. And if you think you'll enjoy content like this in the future, subscribe. I'm putting out videos like this every Tuesday and Friday, and don't see it stopping anytime soon, because I'm loving this. So that about wraps it up, guys. I'll see you in the next one.